Hello, everyone. My name is Mo McDonald, for those of you I've not met yet. I'm really excited that we're going to be meeting soon now to start our Yoga for Stress and Anxiety course. We'll be together for 6 weeks. And my hope is for these little videos that they will give us a bit of insight into what will be happening on the course each week, a little bit of psychoeducation, so that we can understand why the practice of yoga works the way it does for stress and anxiety, and why we do specific practices. So I have been teaching yoga for about 4 years in Stirling. I've done quite a lot of training on yoga as a therapeutic practice, mainly because it's been such a support to my mental and physical well-being. I wanted to kind of dive into why that was and what was going on with the practices and what specific practices were really helpful, especially for stress, anxiety, and depression. So, hence where this course came from. Um, I thought it would be really helpful to share those practices, often very simple practices, but really beneficial. So, on this film, I'm going to talk to you about what stress and anxiety actually are and how they impact our body system, how yoga comes into play, and again, we'll carry that theme on throughout the 6 weeks and really delve into that a little bit more and also what we're going to be doing over the 6 weeks we're together. So, week one, what is stress and anxiety? Now, as you are here, I am presuming that you have felt stressed and anxious or are feeling stressed and anxious. And that's really because you're a human being. Uh, Stress and anxiety are a completely normal human experience and actually essential for survival. Stress helps us to adapt to challenges, and it's like a built-in kind of alarm signal, signaling any potential threats. So stress is really the body's reaction to any demand or challenge which threatens physiological balance. The body's always trying to keep us in balance. So for example, if we are very, very warm, the body tries to help cool us down. If we're very, very cold, the body helps us lift that temperature back to a safe level. So we can often feel that effect of a stressor in an emotional or physical tension when we perceive something to be difficult, overwhelming, or threatening. So it's completely normal. We will all have experienced stress, but when it becomes long-standing or chronic, if we're constantly in a stress situation, it can have a really negative impact on our physical, psychological, and emotional well-being, influencing how we behave. We will all have had our own unique experience of this, but it will not be a positive experience if it's chronic or long term. So our body's response to stress involves two systems. Two main systems are activated when a stressor is introduced. So our nervous system, so the electrical wiring of the body, and the endocrine system, like our messaging center. So the nervous system, specifically, we are thinking about the autonomic nervous system, which, as the name suggests, it works automatically. So we don't have to do anything to get it going. And it involves two parts. And you'll see in the little picture the parasympathetic, which is that rest and digest response, and the sympathetic, which is that fight and flight response, gets us activated and moving. So the autonomic nervous system supports us with our breathing, our blood pressure, our heartbeat. It supports digestion, reproduction. So it's involved in all body processes. So it's a really essential part of our body system. And you can think of the two sides, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, as scales, like balancing each other out. And during our stress response, it's the sympathetic nervous system that triggers this fight and flight response. Freeze and fawn, we're going to talk about that in another video, but it's that fight and flight response that prepares us for action. So that saber-toothed tigers running towards us, our body is triggered, it notices that there's a threat, and it starts to increase the blood pressure, our breathing, our heart rate, and it starts to reduce any body functions that we don't need to get away. So, for example, we're not going to be digesting that meal that we just had. We're not thinking about the immunity for that cold that might be coming up in the winter, our reproduction, or our growth system. We're not concerned about any future things that might come up. We're just thinking about that immediate threat, that fight and flight. We need to get moving, heart rate lifts. We're ready to run. We're bolting away from that saber-tooth tiger. Now, alongside this, our endocrine system floods our bodies with stress hormones. So it's like the adrenaline, and if the response keeps going, cortisol. So they're just messengers to say that we need to act, and they work alongside the nervous system to activate the body movement. Now, you might recognize that, that feeling of maybe feeling a bit jittery within the body, feeling like you can't settle and you just need to keep moving. That's our stress hormones coming through the body. So our brain, our control center, initiates the response for the sympathetic nervous system and the endocrine system. So specifically a part of our brain called the amygdala, which is at the center of our brain. And I like to think of it as the guard dog, as you can see in the little picture. So the guard dog is really swift to detect stress. It's really vigilant barking dog. It activates and it talks to different parts of the brain, telling them that there's a stressor coming, you're in threat, and we need to get to action. So that activates the nervous system and our endocrine system. So it works really well. However, if we are chronically stressed, it can become overused, so it becomes really hypersensitive. A bit like, I recognize from some dogs that I live near, the whiff of any human being outside, any postie, the barking, barking, barking. And it might be there's nothing there, there's no threat, but it doesn't recognize that as not being a threat. And so it's bark, 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 bark. So it's really vigilant, but it means our amygdala, it actually gets more enlarged and it causes this sensitivity to threat. And that's because chronic stress alters our brain function. It can alter the way that our brain structure is. Our brain is very malleable. So that makes us more sensitive to stress and it reinforces those anxiety patterns. And therefore, the body overreacts to stress. That means that just as that dog doesn't recognize when there's a threat and when there's not a threat, it just feels a stressor. We too are a bit like that. So instead of that saber-tooth tiger, that car that might be coming towards us, real life-threatening situations, we won't recognize that and we might have the same response to a traffic jam, a work pressure, family difficulties. Our body can't decipher between the two. So it has the same response for the brown bear, saber-tooth tiger as the traffic jam. The other part of our brain that's really important in this, and we're talking about this because yoga can be supportive here, is called the prefrontal cortex. So it's at the front of the brain, and you can think of that as the newer part. It's almost the more evolved part of the brain that humans have. And that's because it's responsible for decision making and rational thought. So the amygdala, the barking dog, it's in the limbic system, it's that reptile brain. So it's the older part of the brain that's all about survival. And then we've got this prefrontal cortex that is good at decision making and rational thought. And I call that our wise owl. So when we're stressed and we're anxious, that wise owl, we can't really hear it very well, mainly because that barking dog is so loud and it's set off at any opportunity. So in fact, as the amygdala gets enlarged and bigger, our wee wise owl is being downgraded and it's harder to access. And you'll notice that like when you're really stressed or if you're in a really difficult situation, it can be difficult to think rationally or logically or with much clarity. So these reactions are totally vital for dealing with immediate threat. I mean, we want this. If there's something going down, we want to know about it and we want to know about it quickly and swiftly. So our bodies do a totally amazing job. However, it's meant to be short term. It's not meant to be constant. We're not meant to constantly be in this part of the nervous system or with the endocrine system, those stress hormones going through the body, because actually they're very damaging and it's really depleting because it's a very activating response. So with that in mind, because of that, it can cause a lot of issues around digestion, heart disease, and a weakened immune system. And that's because the parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest nervous system, those things are put on pause while we're in this fight and flight response. And so our immunity is never built up. So when we're chronically stressed, or there's a lot going on in our life, you might notice that you get ill more. Um, if our heart rate is constantly lifted, our blood pressure constantly lifted, that's what causes the heart disease. Our stomach, if we're not able to give that time for digestion, and it's really common, you'll hear that, and you might have experienced it, that when you're stressed continually, that you start to have issues with your stomach. And all of that then leads to this chronic stress, leading to anxiety and then depression. So, stress, obviously, though, is not always negative. We need stressors to help us to grow, to adapt, to learn. So, for example, in exercise, we're putting our body under some stress. When I went to go and do my yoga course, I was extremely concerned. I was worried. I was nervous, stressed, but it was positive stress. I wanted to do it, but it was difficult. But it had a positive effect in the long term. So we need to work within and understand healthy levels of stress. When stress does become chronic, as we've said, it will lead to illness. So we need to stay within the parameters that allow us to have that positive stress, which helps us to, well, get me out of bed in the morning, to go and do learning and exercise, and to do things that might be a little bit challenging. So there's an optimal stress level, and it's about us trying to find that and recognizing when we might be going out of our tolerance, our window of tolerance for stressors. So yoga, where does it come into it? So yoga really offers a holistic approach to managing stress and anxiety, and we're going to go into that a little bit more next week. Research has shown it helps us to support us back to balance, and that's because it helps us access that rest and digest nervous system, which really should be where we are most of the time. It should be our default that we're in this rest and digest place so that we can build our immunity, so that we can digest well, so that we can have good reproductive health, so the list goes on, why it's really important that we can get back so that we can build up our reserves. As with the sympathetic system, the parasympathetic nervous system responds to changes in the body, which triggers lowering of the heart rate, the blood pressure, and this is helped by the breath becoming slower and deeper. So we can use tools in yoga to help affect and come into that part of the nervous system. So helping us to bring regulation and bring balance, that homeostasis back to the body. So throughout the 6-week course, we will be using physical postures, breath work, mindfulness techniques to help us access that nervous system, rinse the body of excess cortisol. Because if we have that flooding of the body with adrenaline, cortisol, and then we don't run and we don't fight, it's left sitting there and it's very damaging for our bodies. We're going to look at kind of recognizing that anxious mind and using practices that can help to upgrade the wise owl so that we can hear it a little bit more and maybe respond rather than react to a situation. We can't get rid of stress. I think you'll probably all know that. Life has its ups and downs, but some things we have to endure. And by learning these tools that hopefully can support you to reduce the impact of stress on your well-being. So over the 6 weeks, week 1 and 2, we're going to really focus on self-regulation and coming back to balance. Weeks 3 and 4, we're going to maintain balance and increase our tolerance to stress. Weeks 5 and 6, we're going to notice bringing in elements of mindfulness, We're going to downgrade that barking dog and upgrade the wise owl, or bring awareness around when maybe when the barking dog's going off, and hopefully we can access that wise owl. So our body and minds are not against us. They're trying really hard to help us stay safe, stay alive, and maintain balance. But sometimes they need a little bit of support. So I really hope this course will provide that for you. If you have any questions or observations, then you can please email me or let me know, or we can talk about it when we come together for week 1 of the course, which I'm really looking forward to. So see you then. Bye.